Hello. I'm just going to jump right in because there's a very interesting thing that I noticed early on in the Dollmaker, which I think I mentioned it was an episode I was looking forward to. Um, I'm also working on notes that I took in the dark, so it may take me a while to read certain things, but I remember pretty much everything that I was going to say. Um, the thing that I noticed, the main character, Melissa, in the story part, she had this voice, and I this is my thought process. I said, I know that voice. I hadn't even I was like, because I'm taking notes, I hadn't really even seen her face yet. I just was hearing her voice, and I was like, I know that voice. It's on the Magic School Bus. It's from an animated thing. It's on the Magic School Bus. Is it Wanda? No. Is it Dorothy Ann? Dorothy Ann's often on my mind with these because Betty Ann was the storyteller of both of these episodes. Not Dorothy Ann. Is it? Who's the other one? Who's the one? My old school, Phoebe. And so I looked her up, and initially I looked up the wrong person because I assumed that the voice of Phoebe would be the notable cast that they note on the Wikipedia page. So I looked up Amanda Walsh, who is notable, I suppose, but did not turn out to be the person I thought. And at that point, I wasn't clear who was Melissa, who was Susan, so I kept saying both names. But then I looked up Melissa, an actor named Maya Filar, and at least I think that's how it's pronounced, Maiafilar, and she is Phoebe Therese, is apparently the full name, Phoebe Therese on the Magic School Bus. All 52 episodes from 1994 to 1997, and this episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark aired in 1994. So it's the exact same voice. And if I'd been looking at her, it might have taken me longer, but because she doesn't look like Phoebe. But it was such an exciting thing, and I think I even would have recognized it because if I hadn't just watched season one of the Magic School Bus, because it's such a distinct voice. It's kind of a not that her voice is this way, but Phoebe always kind of nervous and reluctant, not as reluctant as Arnold, but at my old school we never did this, like reluctant. That's the word. So that was my fun. That was the most fun that I had watching these two episodes, just because of the discovery. But the Dollmaker also did not disappoint. I remembered almost every minute of it. There was no, because I knew that I'd seen it, so I wasn't looking for the moment that would have said you've seen this before. But there didn't seem to, like, every moment was I've seen this before. So Betty Ann is the storyteller, and Tucker is very eager to hear her story, because apparently Gary has told him that Betty Ann tells weird stories. And let me just scroll back through the list of what has she, like, is that a thing? Are her stories particularly weird? She told the tale of the Whispering Walls, which I didn't love. I guess it was weird. She told the tale of the 13th floor. Okay, that's weird. That's the one that gave me nightmares. So okay, and that's from season 2, and the tale of the Sorcerer's Apprentice. Okay, the tale of the Nightly Neighbors. Okay, but the 13th floor, that's enough. So yes, she does. She does tell weird, disturbing stories. And so Tucker's very, and then of course, when he finds out it's about dolls, he becomes a little less interested. And she starts talking about dolls are like perfect little people. And the best ones are like if you shrunk a person. And that, of course, is what the story is about. So they go into the world of the story, the tale of the Dollmaker. And Melissa is arriving at her aunt and uncle's house, which is next door to the Hendersons, and she always, when she was growing up, she loved playing with Susan Henderson. And then there's nobody in the house this time, and she asks why, her aunt and uncle say, "Oh, they moved away. We're sorry. We know how you enjoyed them." But Melissa, apparently with nothing else to do, with missing her friend, sneaks into the house and kind of starts looking around. Not something that I can say I wouldn't have done in a similar situation when I was her age, which I'm thinking is about 10, 9, 11, somewhere in there. and she finds a staircase to an attic in a closet. And I think that is often what I was looking for. There was a closet in my dad's parents' house near the front door, an area of the house that we rarely went to because we didn't use the front door. We used the back door where we would park the cars. But it was always such a mysterious closet, and there actually was a semi-hidden staircase in that house. Not really, but there was a way to close off the staircase that I'm thinking of. Anyway, she finds an attic in a closet. She goes up into the attic. She finds a dollhouse. I don't know if it's a dollhouse that she played with Susan. She seems very impressed by it. It's a very nice-looking dollhouse. And a brightly colored, beautiful secret door. And her mom comes in and gets her at this point, I think. So she doesn't get close enough to the door. Her mom says, no, we were entrusted to look after the house, because the Hendersons didn't sell the house. They didn't move their stuff. They just left the house. They entrusted them to look after it, and so she says you shouldn't go looking around. And I think this is where Melissa first says that she saw someone in the window moving around. And Aunt Sally explains Susan didn't just... It's not just that the Hendersons left. They left because Susan disappeared. No one could find her. And so the parents didn't want to stay in the house. Too many memories. They blamed the house. I think this is also not just that her mom finds her. She goes back into the house and opens the door and sees a floor beyond. Now, this is a door that should lead to the outside, but she sees a floor, again, brightly colored, and she's about to step onto it, but her father grabs her and pulls her away. I guess both of them were up there. And that's when they both explain the mystery of the house, or what happened. And then her father makes her look out the door, and sure enough, it's a steep drop, not what she saw before. So after it's all been explained, everybody, the aunt and uncle know that she thought she saw someone there. They have explained Susan disappeared and the parents left. Melissa seems to be sleeping on the porch, or maybe like a porch room, but she's sleeping on she seems that like the wall next to the couch that she's sleeping on looks like siding. So I think she's sleeping on the porch. Maybe it's the coolest place to sleep. It is where I would sleep. And she again sees a light on in the attic. She goes up and let's see. She goes up into the house, breaks the window in the back to get in, and she goes through the door after testing the floor that she finds to make sure that she can step on it. And she's got a ball of string with her, and she, this might be during the day actually, she, and I think that when she goes in there at night is when her uncle saves her from falling. It was dark when I took the notes. So she goes through the door, she goes into rooms, she's calling for Susan, because she thought she saw Susan wandering around. That's something I left out. She sees Susan walking around and calling to her, and that's why she almost steps out, and that's when her uncle saves her. So she's calling for Susan now that she's in the it's the dollhouse. She realizes it's the dollhouse because she looks through one of the windows and she sees Aunt Sally, but Aunt Sally is a giant, and she realizes that's the attic. I'm tiny in a dollhouse, and she starts calling for her Aunt Sally, but that's when Susan appears in a chair and says she says, it's no use, they can't hear you. I've been calling for people, and I've been calling for you. You heard me. And she reveals that she's slowly turning into a doll. So Melissa wants to save herself and her friend, and she realizes, so if the house is a perfect replica of if the dollhouse is a perfect replica of the house, that means that there's a door in the attic that leads perhaps to the real world. And as she goes out into the hall, she finds in the place where the closet door should be, there's a bookcase blocking it. Whoever built the dollhouse to look like the house didn't want that known. They wanted to trap people, I guess, but they had to make it an exact replica. Melissa tries to push it over herself. She can't. She goes back. Susan can't help her because Susan reveals by pulling off one of her hands that she is porcelain, mostly, and she can't do it. So Melissa goes back and manages to push over the shelf, go up into the attic. I loved the detail that the attic has a bunch of oversized props, like a giant pencil, a bunch of little notes, things that they don't belong in a dollhouse, but you're looking for a place to put stuff, you put it into the dollhouse because it's an extra little storage place if you're not using it for actually playing. She finds the door, she opens it, but it leads, it looks like, to the outside, just like the door from the actual attic. Once her uncle had saved her, she saw that it leads to the exact same drop. But she decides to take a leap of faith and take Susan with her because they have nothing to lose. So she brings Susan delicately up to the attic, and then they both go through the door, and I think they reappear in the attic. I don't know if it actually shows where they reappear, but the next shot is of her aunt and uncle all, now we've lost her too, and then she comes up to them and says, no, you didn't lose me, I'm right here, and look, it's Susan, I found her. And then they burn the dollhouse. That's what Betty Ann, on the way out of the story back into the Midnight Society, says they burned the dollhouse, and then everybody's saying goodnight, and as they're all leaving, I think it's Kiki picks up the doll that Betty Ann brought with her, and it looks exactly like Tucker, even wearing the clothes he's wearing, even wearing the hat that he's wearing. So, weird little detail there. Maybe Betty Ann's the weird one now. Kristen was the very weird one. I think Betty Ann's picking up the slack, because in the next story, she plays a similar trick on Tucker, and this is the Bookish Babysitter. I took these notes in the dark. And it's one that I'm pretty sure I had not seen. Didn't recognize any of it, although I recognized the main character, Belinda, because I knew her in several incarnations as a kid. I was friends with people like her. So this time, Betty Ann, her intro is, when you get really into a story, you become part of it. And that's the gist of the story and of the Midnight Society. So Belinda is a babysitter who specializes in reading and getting kids to read, and Ricky is the 12-year-old who doesn't want a babysitter. Now, he's watching something on TV. He's obsessed with TV, this kid, and it looks like some kind of mashup of Dracula and, because I swear I saw Bela Lugosi's face, but maybe I just have Bela Lugosi on the mind. Mashup of, a not copyrighted mashup of black and white horror movies with a new soundtrack and voiceover. That's what it looks like it is. It's not like in, I think, a previous episode they actually played Dawn of the Dead, because it's out of copyright. It's public domain, so they can do that. So he's watching TV. He doesn't want a babysitter, but Belinda comes highly recommended, and she comes in, she turns off the TV, and I think she makes the remote disappear kind of by magic. And she dares him. She says, if you read for 5 minutes, then you can watch all the TV you want for the rest of the night. And so he takes a book from her, he starts reading. She says, out loud, it's got to be out loud, I want to hear the story too. And as he's reading, he starts reading a story, I guess it's about a witch, and so we start to notice that there's cackling going on, or there's a storm. He starts reading about a storm, and we hear the storm, and there's a witch also mentioned. She's flying through the storm. And then he says it's boring, and he closes it, and he tosses it, and he picks up a book called, or a book is, okay, so it seems like, there's a witch's hand reaching through, and then it disappears as he closes the book, but it doesn't just like vanish, it goes like this, because, Nickelodeon live-action budget, they can't make the hand disappear with special effects when they can just go like, so the hand kind of drops and the lighting changes and that's the hand disappearing, which is a detail that I enjoyed, kind of like the other Are You Afraid of the Dark episode where there's a mysterious door in a high up place, and it's just lighting changes that represent the transition up from it being leading to a mystical place to just leading to a dead drop. He begins a story about knights and a king, but he doesn't finish that one either. But the characters he's brought out of the story by starting to read them, and they start chasing him around. He goes to his room, and then he almost gets killed by a knight. And he's running around. There's a witch. There's a ghost. And then he runs back to the room where Belinda is. He finds Belinda, and she's burning the book. And she says the only way to make them go away is to burn the book. But then there's a voice coming from a closet saying, "Don't listen to her." And it turns out that that is Belinda, and the person burning the book is the witch, who wants to burn the book so that the story cannot be completed. And meanwhile, there's a very big, thick book that Belinda has that Ricky wants to read, but she says, "Oh no, you're not ready for that." That book turns out to be the key, because she says, since you burned the stories, now you have to use your imagination to finish the stories. And he tries to cheat by saying, "And the story ended." Not exactly that, but essentially that. And it doesn't work, and Belinda gives him the book, and it's blank. But once he opens it, he finds himself in the world of the story, in a castle, in a crypt or whatever, and as he's doing things, the story is being written. The things he says, the things he does. So that's the magic there. And what is that word? He's got a metal band logo on his shirt, and the book suggests that the symbol will help him, and so he opens his shirt, and as he sees the knight raise its sword, and it's the same image, it's the image of a sword with kind of wings on the bottom, just like the sword the knight has, and the knight stops coming after him. Then a little girl comes in, but she's really the witch. Ricky takes the sword, I guess the knight gave him the sword, and slices the witch and kills the witch. That's where they use their special effects budget, because he doesn't actually make contact with the physical person in the scene with him, but a cut appears across the screen that's crudely animated green goo, rather like Nickelodeon slime, starts to ooze out of the middle of the witch, and then she just descends into it, and the wall opens up. The ghost, turns out, was an ancient king who is now freed from her spell, and Belinda finishes. We go back into the real world, and Belinda is reading the story to him, and suddenly the book has his name on it, because he wrote the story, and I forget what the title was. And Belinda's leaving. Ricky's mom comes home just as they're out of the story, and Belinda gets up to leave, and mom says, "Oh, I haven't paid you," and Belinda says, "I've already been paid," which makes you wonder if she takes something magically or psychically from the experience of making kids read. Betty Ann finishes the story by saying that Ricky went and he looked and he couldn't find any other copies of the book by him. It was a first and only edition, Betty Ann says. And then she's got a book similar to the one in the story, and Tucker really wants to see it. So Tucker kind of pulls it out of her hand, opens it to, very conveniently, the place where she's pasted in pages that say, and Tucker took the book and opened the book and was scared, or something like that. That's not exactly what it says, but his name is in the book. So it's once again a Betty Ann Tucker teasing sort of thing, and another kind of weird trick for her to play. So again, maybe she's the weird one now. But anyway, that's that. And the next two episodes, they're not titles that I recognize. The Tale of the Carved Stone, The Tale of the Guardian's Curse. Sardo returns in the first of those. Sardo. And I don't recognize any of the other guest starring actors or character names, but we'll see when we get there. Pleasant dreams, everyone.